What's going on, guys? Today we're going to cover some of the top pros and cons of living in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Currently I'm at Shoreline Park, one of the really good parks here in Gulf Breeze. There is the water just down there. You've got boardwalks, trails. There's actually dog parks back here if I spin you around. And across the street is a library, a skateboard park, baseball fields, football, soccer, playgrounds. So this is a really cool park. Probably the best park in Gulf Breeze in my opinion. Definitely one of the largest. But we're gonna talk about the pros and cons of living here, or what it might be like to live here. I hope this video will help you give a little insight. My name's Levi Fortner. I'm with LPT Realty and I run the Fortner group here. And we're about to jump in to all the good things and all the bad things in Gulf Breeze, Florida. And so I'm gonna start off with the location. You are right in between Pensacola, Florida, the city, the heart of it, and then also Pensacola Beach, which is kind of separated, much more touristy, but you're slap in the middle. This is kind of a peninsula. So Gulf Breeze is a long strip surrounded by water, but you're close to your Northwest Florida. You can go over to New Orleans for the day. You're also close to many other beaches. You can hop over to Navarre Beach. You could go to Destin for the day and Crab Island, join in on all the tourist fun things. But Gulf Breeze feels a lot more like a community. These are typically residents that live here. Very much a beach feel town, but the location is great in my opinion. It's one of the best things about living in Gulf Breeze is that you're centrally located, very desired, but again you have access to the big city feel of Pensacola and all the events and parades and things that go on there. But you have the more small sought after area here of Gulf Breeze that feels a lot more beachy and Florida-esque, if you will. So that's gonna be number one pro for sure. Okay, so one of the other things, I guess the number two thing about living in Gulf Breeze, Florida would have to be the scenic beauty and the wildlife and just the outdoor amenities. So if you like that kind of lifestyle, if you like getting out and hiking, trails, swimming, the ocean, the beach, there's also tons of fresh water as well. So it's not just the beach, but obviously the beach is one of the main attractions for sure. We've just got miles and miles of white sugar sand. And again, just tons of outdoor activities. There's also hunting, you know, paddle boarding, bicycling, skateboarding, you name it. If it's outdoors, we certainly have it. And that's one of the neat things about Florida. Okay, so I'm walking on Shoreline Park. This is the boardwalk here in the park. And one of the reasons that people super desire Gulf Breeze is because of the low crime rate. Something I don't normally touch on. I'm not really allowed to mention that. If you ask me about a zip code or a neighborhood, I'm really not supposed to say that. But as a whole, Gulf Breeze has a much lower crime rate than compared to certain other cities. And so that's what makes it such sought after. To caveat off of that, I'm gonna also mention that it has some of the most desired school zones, or schools specifically, in Florida, North Florida, in this area for sure. So it's one of the most sought after reasons. And those two together can very much make it a family-friendly or family-oriented place to live, on top of it being in Florida and super desirable. Okay, so this one's gonna be kind of a neutral. I'm gonna say it's a pro and a con, but it's something to mention for sure, and that's just the weather in Gulf Breeze, as well as Florida altogether. The negative side of that is it rains a lot, and there are storms, and there are occasionally hurricanes. So that's something you have to keep in mind. It can affect your insurance, but people also love the weather here, right? That's why they seek the sunshine state. The Florida weather, the beach life, the winters are just great, you know, for 4 or 5 months out of the year. The weather's superb. It can also get pretty hot. It can get sweaty and humidity. Some people think that it's not hot enough. A lot of people actually like to go further south because they like the warmer weather. Me personally, I've lived in Florida my whole life, North Florida for the most part. There are times when I love the weather and there are times when I hate it. Sometimes my mind is like, I want the snow, I'm gonna go move up north, but I love living here, I truly do. And so the weather is something to keep in mind, pros and cons to the weather part. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that the cost of living is gonna be a con in Gulf Breeze. And I just mean that compared to some of the surrounding areas like Pensacola, maybe Navarre, etc. And that's only because it's a little bit more expensive to live here, especially the housing on average, and that's because it's a very desirable place. But because of that, like I said, when you compare it to some of the close areas, the cost of living might be a little bit higher than average. But keep in mind, this is super relative, right? If you are comparing it to other markets, if you're coming from even down south Florida, it might be considered a bargain. Or if you're coming from somewhere like California, New York, right? Some of these places, then Gulf Breeze would be very affordable. But if you're just comparing it to local Pensacola, again, Navarre, maybe Cantonment, Pace, Milton, some of those areas, then the cost of living is gonna be a little bit higher. Okay, so a pretty big con in Gulf Breeze is the traffic. And that's because, again, this is a peninsula. It's kind of a long strip. And so there's really not much room for infrastructure to be developed or for them to fix that issue. On the plus side, Gulf Breeze is pretty established. There's not gonna be a lot more growth here. There won't be a ton of new people living here. But again, traffic is pretty rough, especially on the weekends. Everyone's going to the beach when school's let out. So that's something you want to keep in mind. It can be a bit of a pain. The traffic is definitely a con. All right, so another con with Gulf Breeze has to be the food options. And that's kind of a big one. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but there's not a ton of restaurants here. In fact, a lot of people that live here sometimes find themselves going to Pensacola, maybe downtown to eat, or jumping over to Pensacola Beach. So it's just something you want to keep in mind. Not a ton of food options. There are some really good places, but just not in abundance. So food is scarce here, at least restaurants. I mean, not shopping. There's Publix, there's Walmart, all that kind of stuff. But as far as restaurants, there's not a bunch. So that's a con for sure. So to jump off of not a lot of food options, there's also not a bunch of nightlife. So if you find yourself wanting to go out every weekend, go to bars or clubs or what have you, that's not too much here in Gulf Breeze. This is a more family-friendly, kind of slow town kind of vibes. There are bars and whatnot, but again, you'll probably find yourself going over to Pensacola or Pensacola Beach or even Navarre, et cetera, et cetera. So nightlife is kind of lacking here. So if you're looking for a good time, if you want to walk to a bunch of bars and catch Ubers and stuff, that's not really here in Gulf Breeze. But there is a lot of, community events and things like that, just not nightlife. Okay, one last little con. It's not a big deal, but something I just wanted to throw in mind, especially if you're not from here, is gonna be mosquitoes. They live here. They love Florida. They come down here for the warmer weather, the beach, whatever it is. Mosquitoes can be here. Plenty of ways to deal with it. Repellent, burning citronella candles or what have you. But they are here, just something you think about. They can get a little bit annoying in the summer months. So there are many more pros and cons. I didn't cover everything, but I hope to get kind of the majority or some of the big key points. If you think I missed something, comment down below. I'd love to hear your feedback. And if you're thinking about moving here, reach out. My name's Levi. I'm with LPT Realty and I run the Fortner Group. I'm a homeowner here. I moved here a few years ago, so I love to try to give value and provide an honest, unbiased opinion of what it's like to live here on the Gulf Coast, on the Emerald Coast. I do love it here, so maybe I can be a little bit biased, but I try to be as kind of undivided as I can. And so I like making this content. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys soon.